Hi everyone, Alon Lits here. I'm the CEO of October Health. Very excited today to have Anita Lettink with me. She's an HR thought leader. She's had an illustrious career, specializing in HR tech, in outsourcing, and payroll. Lots to talk about, but today we're here to talk about financial stress, which is one of the biggest stresses that we see in our data impacting individuals in the workplace, and how that really impacts on an individual's ability to perform. And Anita's going to share, what organizations can do to help individuals thrive and manage that, and some of the issues that you're seeing in the workplace. So, Anita, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much for making the time. I always love to start these off. We're here at HR Tech Fest. You're from Amsterdam. You've had a great career. Do you mind sharing a bit of your background, a bit of your career with the audience?
No, of course not. So I came to HR from a technology background. I was an infrastructure engineer. And when I joined an HR and payroll outsourcing and consulting firm, that completely shifted my view from technology only to HR, payroll, and technology. So I spent about 20 years working for large corporations, helping them rethink HR, establishing HR shared service centers. I also managed a payroll outsourcing center, and then later became responsible for strategy and partnerships on the global level. Shortly before the pandemic, I decided to take a sabbatical. Obviously, that didn't happen. Yeah, unfortunately, all the borders closed before I could even start my first trip. But it sort of brought me into this new career where I now help HR tech companies think through strategy, go-to-market, product strategy. I speak a lot on the future of HR, and I wrote 2 books about, one about payroll and the other about establishing pay transparency. So a lot of different things, but always helping HR and payroll departments think through the latest innovations and apply that in their own business.
Awesome. So, yeah, amazing experience, amazing career, and I think, sought after thought leader in the market. So really appreciate you making the time. So obviously a lot of experience with payroll. Payroll directly linked to financial stress. Do you maybe want to share some of the trends that you're seeing in the market around financial stress and what that means?
Yeah, and let's start before the pandemic, because I also managed a company, and when we suspected that people had mental or financial problems, it really wasn't done to bring that up, right? You then switched over into the employee's private domain, and that was sort of not done, basically. But the pandemic changed all that. First, because mental health became an issue that you could more easily address, and also because we had to address it. And that also opened up the way to discuss and address financial health issues, because over time, we have started to understand mental health issues better and discovered that sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes they are caused by financial problems. And that's totally understandable, because if you have a stack of bills at your desk at home and you don't know how to pay them, and you worry about that, you bring that worry into the workplace. And you cannot be your whole self. At work, you cannot do your best simply because that worry is constantly on your mind. And I think because employers are starting to understand that link between how can people bring their best selves to work and what are the barriers, and financial health is one of those barriers, they are also becoming, or they also become more willing to address it, and employees are more willing to have their employees bring it up and help them.
So I guess it's one of those unintended benefits of COVID that that kind of taboo around the subject has been removed. But maybe just to take a step back because it's a difficult one,
Yeah,
right?
it's really difficult.
Because it's not an easy one to fix, right? I mean, obviously the fix would be let's pay people more, but most organizations just can't do that, right? So if you're sitting here and someone's listening and thinking about, well, I know my people are stressed, right, financially, but how do I actually help them? Because it's not practical to go and just give increases across the board.
No, and actually what we have learned is that more money is almost never the solution.
Interesting.
People at all salary scales have financial issues, even people that make like $100,000 or more. It has to do with the fact that some people learn at home from their parents, from their caretakers, how to manage their money. But if you don't learn it when you grow up, if people don't teach it to you, then there's no place where you can get that knowledge because it's not addressed in elementary school or high school or university or whatever vocational training you take. So it's almost, if you become 10 or 12 years old and you don't know how to manage your money, then you will not know how to manage your money in future. And it is therefore much more important that employers first of all, have the conversation. So what is behind all of this financial stress? And I think that 80% of the time they will find that people really first of all, they're not able to read their payslip. So they have no understanding of what goes out, what comes into the bank, and what they can spend.
People see the gross number.
Exactly, and they don't quite, so they see that there's a gross number and all kinds of things are taken out and then the net ends up in their bank account. Most people understand that. But why that is and what gets paid out of that gross to come to net, almost no one knows that. So fortunately, we now have some technical help, like especially AI is really good in creating what we call intelligent pay slips that help people understand that, okay, this month you earn a little bit more and that is because of that you worked more hours or maybe you got a bonus, but that explains.
So I love that. Like, do you mind just explaining what that looks like? Because it sounds great, but I think a lot of people just won't see that in practice.
No. Yeah. This is really a new invention. It came onto the market probably this year, maybe end of last year. And some advances in AI have helped us get there. Until now, we had what we call the smart payslip, but the explanation on that payslip was the same for everyone. It did not dive into your personal finances. And now with the intelligent payslip, we can go a step further. We can not only explain what is on the payslip, but also how it works out for you personally, and compare it to last month's payslip or maybe to last year's payslip, and give you an idea of what is incidental and what is permanent. And so sometimes people mix that up and they think that a bonus that they got is permanent and now they change their spending patterns, where in fact it was just a one-time extra bit of money, and they should not have adjusted their spending patterns. And the other way around, when a salary increase is actually permanent, the intelligent payslip will also tell that to people and say, from now on, you have more money in the bank and you get like, I don't know, $300 or 500 Rand or what have you every month.
Awesome. So I guess that's just the power of generative AI, that it
Yep.
can personalize that interpretation
Exactly. Yeah.
and make it a bit more human for people to understand the realities.
And also in normal language, right? Which is super important.
Yeah, free of jargon, because
Yeah.
that's part of the problem, I think, with financial stress, or going back to your point around financial education, there's just so much jargon, right? And that, I think, maybe is the point that you're alluding to around financial education, right? So I think the reality is, and this is unfortunate and probably a failure of our schooling system more broadly, and it's like, based on your experience, it's not a South Africa problem, this is a global problem, right? Where we're not teaching individuals these basics. But now the reality is, for most people listening, you're sitting with organizations where people just don't have that basic financial literacy.
Yes.
So how do you build that? What can organizations do?
So besides things like the intelligent payslips, you now also have a lot of apps on the market that you can link to your payroll. and that help people divide their money. So once the money comes in, this is what goes to rent. This is what goes to, for instance, a car payment, or this goes to insurance or your pension. And this is the amount that goes into your bank. This is what you have for spending. And people can assign or divide that amount to be distributed automatically. So maybe they want to save 50 euros a month. So automatically 50 euros goes into a savings account. So it gives people more insights into, this is my net salary, these are all my payments. And so ultimately this is what I'm left with. And for my next pay period, this is what I can spend on groceries or whatever I need to buy. And then there's a little bit left and I can do something extra with it. Or maybe I don't have enough money to cover the rest of my pay period. And so I need to think about how I spend less or what else I can do to get more money.
And I love what you've shared, and I think what it also does, it creates discipline, right? If it's automatically being set aside from a savings perspective, because if it's not automatically happening, then that incentive to say, well, this month I'll skip on that, you can avoid that. So.
Yeah, and I also think that we are, we now see that apps outside of HR and payroll do those things too. They make life easier. They do things automatically for you. And so it becomes a sort of a habit that you set something up and then from now on it works automatically that way. And for these applications, for these financial wellness applications, it works in the same way. And so it totally ties into what people are already expecting from all the apps that they have on their smartphones. It automates what they are doing, and now in this case, it automates what they are spending.
So I guess sticking to something versus just creating the budget and then struggling to implement.
Yeah, and also having much more control over what is happening from a financial point of view in your personal life.
Yeah, that data, right, and that transparency. So maybe just to kind of touch on financial stress, I don't think we can speak about financial stress without kind of acknowledging like the reality that unfortunately there's a debt burden on a lot of individuals. And as soon as that money hits the bank account, before the individual can touch it, a lot of money's going out. So what do individuals do, what do organizations do if that is the reality for a lot of their workforce?
I think what they can do, because there are limitations as an employer to what you can do. You cannot veer too much into the personal domain of an employee 100%. And you cannot determine how they spend their money. So you will have to accept the fact, how unfortunate this is, that there will always be people that cannot control or manage their money well, and so there will be people with debt. But you can do something about financial, I'm always gonna say illiterateness, because you can teach people through classes. You can provide them with information about the financial choices that they make so that they become more literate. They understand better how the financial system works. And basically you catch them up on what they did not learn in the first 12 years of their lives, but what they will need to manage their financial health towards the future.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, it just goes to the point people just don't understand debt, right? And what the true cost of interest is.
I think exactly that. So people always look at mortgages also. You pay a lot of interest on mortgages, but most people don't understand that very well. And they only look at the mortgage amount, but they don't understand that they are not paying off their house, they are paying off the interest to the bank. So the difference between paying off interest and actually paying off the debt is a concept that not many people understand, and therefore they underestimate the total amount that they will spend on whatever debt that is. And the other thing is that once people incur debt, they typically incur debt over debt because they miss deadlines, and so
debt to repay debt.
Exactly.
And it becomes more expensive. So it is a balancing act, right? Because there is a level of debt or credit that is efficient, right?
Yep, absolutely, yeah.
But there's kind of a step that maybe goes too far.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, it comes back to education. What is that fine line and how do people balance it? Maybe I think an important point that you're already hitting home is this point that, you know, education needs to start early. So are you seeing any organizations do anything to help, you know, caregivers within the organization empower, you know, their families to start learning or developing these habits?
It's a really good point, but no. I see more nonprofits that are trying to bank unbanked people, for instance, help kids to understand why it's important that they start thinking about a bank account, or that tell parents to actually give their kids a bank account so that they can learn, even with like very small amounts, how to manage their money and understand how that works. Physically from a cash perspective, but also digitally, because more and more businesses stop taking cash. And so I once had this example of I was somewhere with my nephew and he wanted something else and I said, no, I have no more money. My money is gone. And he said, but you have that plastic card, so take it to the machine and get some more. And I said, no, it's gone. And so the concept of even if you can get money out of the ATM, there's still a limit to what you can take out, is something that you have to teach children as well.
Yeah, and you almost want to go back to those basics of, like, you know, money in a piggy bank, right? Like, because it's so powerful to see it kind of accumulate over time visually versus just seeing it exist on a screen.
Yeah, it's interesting that there are now some studies that show what the differences are between physical money and saving in a piggy bank, because you can see it grow, and it gets heavier and heavier. And saving digitally, because you watch the numbers grow, but it really doesn't mean anything. It does not connect in people's heads to more money. Yeah, it's really strange.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's probably, you know, only going to become more difficult as the world becomes more digital.
Exactly. Yeah.
So touching on this topic of payroll, and, you know, obviously your area where you've got a lot of expertise is like this concept of total compensation.
Yeah.
Right, and, you know, an organization, you've got a cost to company. How do you think organizations think about where best to use it? Because as you say, you can throw a lot of kind of benefits at individuals, but they may not be getting benefit from those benefits, or they may not appreciate those benefits. So what trends are you seeing when it comes to total compensation, the future of benefits at an employee level?
Yeah, so one thing, so there's two trends actually. The one is pay transparency and equal pay. A very important topic, especially in Europe where I live, with the new law coming into effect, and making sure that everyone is paid for the work that they do instead of who they are. So that's one. So this whole pay transparency.
So is that about leveling, about clarity of role, expectation?
Yeah, it's basically about giving people insight in the roles that they have, the pay bands that correspond with that, and the way that they are evaluated. So it's making everything objective instead of, sometimes it's, you know, a pay raise can be very subjective. But also giving people insights in career options, giving candidates insights in what you are willing to pay and where they fit. So people will have a lot more knowledge about salaries and compensation than they had before, because everything will be transparent. Secondly, this is about personalization. I believe that the way that we looked at flexible benefits, maybe the last 5 to 10 years, was okay, but was only the start. And the reason I say that is because most employers created packages for employees. So they decided, okay, we have this flavor and this flavor and this flavor, pick one. What we are starting to understand is that financial wishes and the sort of benefits that you would like to have are far more attached to life events than to anything else, not to work events, not to age, not to anything. And the reason for that, obviously, is that many people or life events are not as tied to age as it was before. You have people in their 20s who get a first child, but also in their 30s, in their 40s, and men obviously can also have in their 50s and in their 60s children. And so they want daycare and those types of benefits and health insurance for dependents. So companies should assume less about how well they know their employees and be more open about, here is our palette of benefits, and take the ones that are most beneficial to you. But also there, explain very well what it means. And it's totally okay to say, well, you know what, from a corporate perspective, we want everyone to enjoy a good pension. So you cannot choose whether or not you get a pension. Everyone gets a pension. For everyone, we pay this premium. And no, you cannot change that out for another benefit, because we find this so important. And some companies say, well, whatever you do with your money is up to you. So total compensation, this is what we pay you in salary. This is the remaining balance. Here is a menu of options. Please pick the ones that you need most.
Okay. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, and I love the framing of life stage, right? And ensuring that people can pick benefits that make sense for their life stage. I think, you know, with your HR tech hat on now, like, I'm sure we've got a lot of listeners who are thinking, okay, well, that's great, right? I'd love to give my people as much choice as possible, but that sounds like an admin nightmare, right? How, if I've got a large workforce, how do I adapt benefits to kind of account for that?
Well, fortunately, obviously, there are solutions on the market that manage that for you. Okay. So what you do as an employer is you determine the balance, the available balance for people, and then you can set up, you can make your choice out of the benefits that you want to offer. And then your employees can just pick and choose until they have filled their balance. Okay.
So it is completely
automated.
Completely automated, so low burden on HR, and complete flexibility within constraints, right?
Right,
for
individuals. And typically attached to your HR solution and your payroll, so that every change is also automatically calculated, and the pay slips, for instance, or the benefits for employees are automatically adjusted.
Awesome, amazing.
Yeah.
So if we maybe just like on this concept of compensation, obviously an important lever when it comes to attracting and retaining talent. In your experience, if you're looking at, like, you know, the world of both talent attraction, talent retention, where does it stack, right? How important is compensation to getting top talent?
It's very important. And I think sometimes people understand or don't understand how important it is. When I speak at conferences, I typically ask the audience, so what do you think gets someone new into the door? Why do they decide to work for you? And often I get answers like, well, it's our values, or it's our purpose, or it's our career options, or our education. And that is correct, but ultimately the reason why people sign with you is, in almost all of the cases, your compensation package. That is what they discuss with their partner at home. I'm going to say there are exceptions, because sometimes people decide, I really want to work for a startup, and they take a hit on their salary because of that startup. But in most of the cases, people don't have the luxury to turn down a job that makes that pays them more, and so the compensation package is what ultimately makes them decide for a company. The moment that they join you, that flips, because then the values, the purpose, the education, your career options all move into the top, and compensation moves lower into the rank, because they work for you, and everyone knows that in the first year you probably don't get a raise. So that is how that works. This has been the case for, I've looked at all the research, for at least like as far back as I could find research, compensation makes ultimately the decision.
Sure. And how are employees looking at that purely on a cash perspective? To your example around startups, is equity coming into the equation? I think that also kind of starts to kind of go back to your point on financial literacy, because equity is not a very well understood, especially in a startup, right?
Correct.
So does that play into it? Is it just purely cash in that environment? How do people understand that? What are you seeing as a trend?
Yeah, so what I discovered also from managing people is that also here there is some illiteracy effect. What people do when they look at other jobs is they compare the base salary. So here I earn this, there I earn that. And they forget to think about the benefits. And when we discovered that in our employee population, some people had left thinking they would earn more, but in the end, not making more from a total compensation perspective, we started to provide total compensation statements to our employee population so that they could see how much they earned on a gross base. So we would also take into account the vacation days and travel allowances, company cars, benefits,
So
whatever
food
we
or
had.
snack, that type of thing.
Exactly. And so people then saw the total amount, and that educated them on the fact that, oh, I should look at more than just the base salary when I look at a new job and think I'm going to get ahead, where at the end of the day, I don't. This helped us manage our exits and was an eye-opener. So I always recommend to employers to provide a total compensation statement to people, because most people don't see what you as an employer spend above the line just to pay them this salary and give them this compensation. Once again, it's quite complex, and if you don't understand how that works, then you probably you're comparing apples to pears when you are comparing two contracts, and especially when that leads employees to make a choice that's ultimately not beneficial to them. That's a problem, because they think they're getting ahead where in fact they're taking a step back.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful, but just want to go a little bit deeper there, just around practically how do you do that? Is that saying in addition to the pay slip that's issued to employees, are organizations that are doing this well doing this monthly? Is it an annual thing? How does an organization wanting to adopt that practice implement it?
Yeah, typically it's an annual thing.
Okay.
Especially when you have salary people, like on a monthly salary, the practice is that you raise their salary once a year, so their overall compensation changes once a year, and therefore an annual statement will do the work. With all these new technologies that we have, it's really simple to provide that to them at a mouse click or at a click of a button. So
at an individualized level.
Exactly, exactly. So it's not that difficult anymore if all the systems are connected, or if you use an integrated HR and payroll system. Might be sometimes a little bit difficult to pull in the benefits because they come from different systems, but ultimately, I think if you provide that once a year, that is enough.
Okay, great, and appreciate that. So, in closing, you are a HR thought leader. You're on the pulse of the future of HR tech more broadly, whether it's payroll or more broadly the future of work. What is that one thing that gets you excited about the way the world's evolving?
I think that with all the technology that we have today, we can really give people a personalized, and I often say a hyper-personalized experience at work, both from a development, but also from a financial support perspective. And that can improve work and also the work experience for people. And I think that anything that we can do to make work better for people, we should do.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Really loved the conversation. we really unpack so much and touch on so much, starting off with financial stress, how that impacts individuals, what organizations can do from an education perspective, both in how individuals can maybe be more responsible, but also just understand the basics around financial literacy to then be empowered to better manage their own constraints and resources. We've spoken about total compensation, the future of tech, some payroll technologies which can hopefully demystify this world of finance. And I think, if nothing else, the biggest takeaway is just the future of individualization or personalization for the employee experience more broadly.
Thank you. Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.